Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Brunke, and uh, I am the founder and CEO of Global Chamber, now driving, picking up some bagels from my wife. So maybe that's a good or I'm headed home to the home office, so I'll be there in about 3 minutes. So I apologize for starting this very important conversation on the run, if you will. But you know what? It's somewhat emblematic of what leadership is today. What we all go through is that we are living lives that are unprecedented in terms of how busy they are, and to be able to carve out clean time for nearly anything these days is very difficult. So please recognize that the fact that I'm driving is not a product of how important I think this conversation is. It is very important. But I just was not able to better manage my time. And that's part of the reason why this meeting is here is I want to be a better leader. I want to be a better time manager. I want to be more supportive of our members. And Rutherford Pascal, like Michael Quigley in parallel, who's here in the audience, have both been incredible inspirations for me. Michael Quigley and his book Loving Leadership is a book that we all should read. It's a book that talks about leadership in the way that I aspire to be a leader. And one of the reasons why I admire Michael so much is how he articulates what that's all about. In somewhat of a similar way, Rutherford Pascal, who joined a little bit over a year ago, I believe, Global Chamber, uh, talked about how the things he wanted to do after having a very successful leadership career within big pharma, the impact he wished to have with leaders and improving their leadership, and having now seen introductions made to Rutherford that have turned into very positive experiences for the people he's worked with, have inspired me enough to say, wow, Rutherford is extraordinary. And as I've seen him work, I started to then resonate with some of his recommendations around uh, John Maxwell in particular, and John Maxwell and in his writing about leadership. I've read 6 of John Maxwell's books just in the last couple months, and I've also read 6 of those, 2 of those twice, because I'm crazy. I'm crazy that I waited so long to read the books, and crazy not to have digested the important ideas that are in those books. And by the way, Rutherford, I also read a couple books by Tony Robbins in the meantime. And undoubtedly today, in the kickoff of this conversation, I'd love to hear your kind of perspectives about how who should be on our reading list and what the priorities are relative to that. And I will say, with John Maxwell, he was such a home run from the beginning for me. Like with Michael Quigley, what he writes is so in tune with how I view the world and so comfortable with my worldview that both of them went down really easy. Both of them were magnificent. In the case of Tony Robbins, honestly, I fought that one. It's like, I don't like this guy. I don't connect with this guy. I feel like he's artificial. I don't like him. I That's how I felt. But I stuck with it, and I went through it. And you know what? After a few hours of listening to him, I overcame my resistance to him, and I learned a lot, have learned a lot from him about his ideas and some key aspects of leadership and my own personal journey. I was able to break through by just sticking with it. Um, and so I don't know how to fully explain that or what it's all about, but nonetheless, I think maybe at the end of the day, let's all listen. Certainly listen to today. Listen to Rutherford Pascal because he's processed all of this for himself. He's processed this in ways for other people. And I appreciate you so much, Rutherford, for your support and collaboration of Global Chamber, for your knowledge about the topic of leadership, for your own leadership, and for your ability to talk to people about their leadership. So I would like in this session today to frame this up as a series of questions to Rutherford, and we have 5 or 6 of them staged already. And I'd ask all of you as participants to listen and to ask questions, ideally with by raising your hand. But if just I'll give everyone time, and hopefully there'll be pause for you to interrupt and ask questions. Rutherford has asked that that's okay, that's fine. He'd rather have interaction rather than, as we ask a question, for you to wait and to ask the question later, while it's appropriate, while it's pertinent, while we're discussing the topic. So what I'd like to ask at the beginning of Rutherford, and then I'll kind of deeper dive into the questions that we've asked that we kind of covered, is could you talk about leadership maybe more holistically? What should we as young global leaders or people who want to have impact and want to improve our leadership at whatever stage we're in, how should we be thinking about leadership for ourselves, as maybe the first question that we cover today, and then let's get into the more specific ones. What should we be thinking about leadership as we start this discussion?
Hey, Doug, thanks for the question, and that's an interesting question. So the thing about leadership's a very big, broad topic, and the most important thing for me in everybody's leadership, in my leadership, in Michael's leadership, and Doug's is really knowing who you are, right? Who you are as a person, human being, also how you communicate, right? Because in order to start, the baseline is you, right? Then after you know who you are, what you stand for, your values, your expectations, all of those things, then it's about knowing your audience, customers, team, whatever you're working with. That's the most important thing. Because if you don't have that baseline, if you don't have that baseline of understanding about who you are and what you're trying to communicate, what your vision is, and you don't know the people that you are working with, it's hard to influence, it's hard to communicate, it's very difficult to have everybody pulling one rope in the same direction if you don't have that. So to me, it starts with that, and then after that, you kind of work through with different conversations, different types of conversations, verbal, written, video, whatever the types of conversations, to start building and growing on that relationship and building and growing on that trust. And so that's that. I'll stop there. But again, the most important thing is knowing who you are, and the second most important thing is knowing who you are working with.
How have you gone through that journey? How did that journey work for you?
So, like everybody else, so let me answer it this way. So, when I became a first line leader and I would start interviewing people, they would ask me what my leadership style was, and I had no clue what they meant. I had no, I, it's one of those things you don't study. I didn't study and I didn't think about it. And what helped me after I heard it a few times, I asked my team, what they thought was important or what about my leadership style. And what I'll tell you, Doug, is the answers I got back were very interesting because they described me and how I led in a way that I would never have described me or how I led, So in the words, and there was consistency with 60-70% of what they said. And they said all of them said a word that was really interesting. So I realized how I was coming across to my team. And there's certain things that were really good. There was a couple things that I needed to adjust to improve upon. I'll tell you one of them. I'm not sure if Michael, you can, or anybody on the call, you can think about this. But somebody told me when I would email them or text them and say, hey, give me a call, they got frightened. They got anxiety. They thought it was a very negative. They thought I was going to tell them something bad, right? So I said, oh, and then I started saying, give me a call. Good news. Give me a call. No issues. Something to allay fears, but I still wanted to talk to them because what I told people later on in my career is, as a leader, every word is parsed. Everything you say is parsed. Not only what you say, it's how you say it. Right? So you have to be very careful. Now, I say that, and I want people to be authentic, but I want people to understand that until your team or the people get to know who you are, they're going to evaluate every single thing that you do, how you do it, how you say it, and they're going to make an evaluation of, can I follow this person? Should I follow this person? Can I trust this person? Does this person have my back? Is this person the right person to move this team forward? Just by the words you say and how you say it.
As you've grown as a leader, and have more and more influence and more impact, um, how have you kept up in terms of continually improving to be able to perform at a higher level?
So it's a great question. So like anything else, you gotta really want to, you gotta have the passion for it. Everyone talks about continuous learning, and that's part of it. And you also want to be great. If you want to be great for your team, you have to get better. So you mentioned John Maxwell, and John Maxwell has one of his books is called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Law number 1 is the law of the lid. And the law of the lid basically says that everybody has a lid on their leadership. If you think about the lowest leader is at a 1 and the highest leader is at a 10. If you say, okay, Rutherford, I'm a 5. I'm a 5 leader. If I'm a 5 leader, that means my team can't go above a 4. If I have to work hard to get them 4, they'll probably get to about 3, 3.5. So in order for me to grow, Doug, I have to get my leadership ability to a 7, 8, so I can bring my team up to a 5, 6, 7. So it's incumbent upon me as a leader to grow in how I lead, and understanding everything about leadership for the team to grow. That's the most important thing. The first thing, like I mentioned before, is knowing who you are and growing as a leader. When leaders grow, their teams grow.
In times like
these where there's a lot more to do, and as you become a higher level leader with influence over more people, the combination of that can be daunting. And then again, when you add levels of chaos like is in the world today or within a business or in a variety of ways, it adds stress and tension, and that can have detrimental impact on leadership. Um, Considering today's world that has all sorts of changes with technology, all sorts of geopolitical changes in the world of trade, that things are changing constantly, and how does that impact how we view leadership for ourselves?
So everything is about, so if all those things are happening, right? Basically, you're talking about chaos, right, Doug? You're talking about there's a lot of chaotic things happening around. And as the leader, you have to be stable, right? You have to understand the entire situation. So let me give you the analogy of a fire, right? If there's a building on fire and you will see a fire truck travel to the scene, what you'll never see is the firemen running to the fire. They don't do that. They look at it and they assess what the issue is, where the lead is, and how they're going to attack the fire. How are they going to put out the flames? How are they going to save lives? What's the priority? What's the priorities, right? This is the first thing we're going to do. Second thing, what's the tools that we're going to use or need to put out this fire and save as many lives as possible? And it's the same mentality as a leader. You are calm, you assess the situation, you figure out what's the priorities, the tools, the steps that you're going to take, and no matter what situation you're in. If you do that, you have a greater opportunity to be successful. Let me give you the opposite. Like, so if there's a fire and and you have your leaders running around screaming, yelling, and their hair's on fire, you're not going to get great direction. There's no clarity, there's no specific direction. People are going to be, running around in all different directions. I mentioned pulling one rope in the same direction. That's how you're going to get the greatest torque, the greatest movement from your company. If everybody knows what's going on, there's clarity in goals, there's clarity in how we're going to get there, it's going to move that direction. And with chaos, it's the same thing. It's when you've seen people or companies or leaders succeed in crisis or chaos or difficult situations, it's because it's been calm, thought out, looked at every possible opportunity, options, and then evaluate and take the right one in the right order to move to really put that fire out and move on and grow the business.
Great perspectives. I see. Uh, I see he's drinking, but he is engaged. So, Michael Quigley, thank you for joining today. The next series of questions I'd like to transition into more on the global side of things. What we're trying to accomplish here is beginning a monthly series of conversations about leadership applied to global business. And so we've been talking more in, I'd say, more general terms about leaders in business. What have been your thoughts so far on what we've covered, and anything that you would like to either confirm or add to what Rutherford has said so far?
Oh, wow. Didn't expect the chance to speak. Well, thank you. Everything Rutherford has said, I endorse and agree with 100%. There's not a single thing he said, and I've gone, no, not at all. The thing you said about knowing yourself is everything. It's so critical. My father actually expanded on it a little bit, and he taught me something which I passed on, and it was the two things you said. He just added a couple more. He said, You've got to know the situation, you've got to know the task, you've got to know your followers, and you've got to know yourself. And the idea is that if any one of those is missing, you'll run into the fire because you're not self-aware, or you might misengage the situation, things like that. So those 4 no's, I think, are really, really important. I love what you said about a calm presence, because Doug, I quote this at people all the time. I don't think you remember saying it. It was one of the things you said on a leadership webinar 2 years ago. And you said the leader is always the bottleneck, which goes back to what Rutherford was saying. As you grow yourself, your team will grow. That's definitely true, because as John C. Maxwell said, if you don't have any followers, you're just a person taking a walk.
Mm-hmm.
But what I like about what Doug said, and this is something I've really focused on in my leadership and try and teach people, is you said, Doug, a leader should have nothing in their mind so they can best respond to the needs of their people. And I really like that, because I think too many people still try and plan it and war game it. And when they say that, I'm going to do that. And when it doesn't go that way, in that moment, if you are not calm and able to respond, you're gonna freak. I didn't expect her to say that. I didn't expect that to go that way. And then you're in pressure. And under pressure, a lot of people, unless you've practiced it, they will wilt. So for me, that calmness is everything, because what you also do is that's infectious, like Rutherford was saying. You give off that vibe. Like I saw your dog in the background, dogs can pick up on vibes, and people are the same. They can tell if you've got the best interests at heart, and they can also tell if you know what you're doing. And then, by not what you say, by how you do it. So now I'm just really happy to be here and to be listening to this, because it's really affirming me, because leadership is so hard. And yet so many people seem to have so much to say about it that is shallow. So when you hear some depth, it really means a lot to me. So yeah, just a couple.
So Michael, think about this, right? So think about when people make decisions that are quick, in anger, so when you're in that state, like when you're not really thinking about options and you're just like, I gotta finish, and you're not making, there's no processing of, okay, this, I could do this, or this. There's nothing. You're gonna go, the first thing in your mind. Now, every once in a while, serendipity happens and it's the right thing. 80% of the time, you've made the problem worse, right? And something you can't come back from. So that's why as a leader, calmness, coolness, understanding, listening to everybody, everybody's input is really important.
Yeah, the aspect, and going back to Michael on loving leadership, and that aspect of caring about the people that you're guiding, but without losing touch with where you're headed, is such an interesting balance. And how, Rutherford, do you balance that, of the level of care toward the people you're guiding, and the vision, taking them to this different place than they are today?
Listen, this is a people business, right? Leadership is you're leading people. So you have to have a certain level of love for the people that you're leading, or nothing positive is going to happen. You have to want to get that person to the next level. You have to, first of all, that person also has to want to get it there, right? But you have to, if you hate people, this is the wrong. Leadership is hard, like Michael said. If you don't like people, so I worked in the pharmaceutical industry, so I was a rep for Bristol Myers Squibb, and I was with this pediatrician, and I was trying to talk to him about a product I had, and he comes out of the office with this baby, and he said to me, he said, "Oh, so much crying. I hate when these babies cry." And I said to him, I said, that's going to happen the entire part of your career. He goes, I know, I just didn't think it was going to be this much what I was going into, right? So I kept thinking to myself, if you take a leadership role and you want to be great, people are going to be the greatest part of your leadership and also the most difficult part of your leadership journey, right? And you need to embrace both, right? It's going to happen. You're not gonna be in a situation where everything is great all the time. And by the way, that's not you leadership is shown like character when things go wrong. Right. You don't show leadership when things are swimming because anybody could lead when things are up and to the right, hockey stick effect. It's when leadership really is necessary is when things are not going well. And when there's ambiguity, right? There's volatility. That's when you need somebody to set a course of action, have a vision that everybody can see and can follow. That's when leadership is necessary, and that's really necessary. It's always necessary, but that's when it's definitely necessary to grow. So
The level of complexity increases with, as we've already mentioned, chaos happening either in the
yes,
business or in the environment or both. And then when you're doing global business, you've got cultural
yes,
differences and you've just got people differences. People are different, right? So how they respond to different things is important. But with culture, you've got people perceiving what a leader is and what resonates with them, of whether they're going to follow or not, or how they respect or not respect what a leader's all about. It actually is different country to country in
yes.
some cases. So how do we weave that in as a leader for potentially and very often multicultural uh, situations? How does that impact leadership?
It's a very if you're leading a multicultural, multinational team, it's incumbent upon you to do, to learn, to do research, to understand each and every region area that you're dealing with, because you won't be able to communicate the message the right way. You just won't, because it will mean one thing in the US and a much different thing in Germany and a much different thing in Japan, right? So you have to learn how to say this with all these different cultures. And that simply comes down to knowing the cultures, knowing the situation in every area. Michael talked about the 4 no's, right? And he's 1,000% correct. And I say this to everybody else. I say there's 3 letters, KYP, know your people. That's the most important thing. Besides knowing yourself, it's knowing your people. In the situation from an international perspective is knowing your people and their culture, right? And because if you don't know, because you'll think you're a great leader because you have 10 people on your team and 6 or 7 of them are nodding their heads and oh yeah, and there's 3 or 4 who are just not connecting, they're not engaging, and you don't understand why. Maybe because the message, the tone, the words you use didn't translate in their culture, or was actually had the opposite effect that you wanted to have in their culture, which is, by the way, has happened many times. So that's why it's incumbent upon the leader to learn as much as they can about a leader. And by the way, and this is what I'm saying is not difficult. It takes time. It takes the ability to want to be a great leader for everybody, not just communicate the way you want to communicate. You have to want to communicate with everybody and have everybody on the same page. So if you have somebody that you believe is disengaged or has not doing having a conversation, tell me, is there something that I'm saying that is not translating? How can how can I lead you better? What are things that I mean, just normal questions about how is the information being, uploaded in your brain and in your sense? Am I saying it the right way? And be vulnerable. Be vulnerable that maybe I can't do this that way. I can't say it that way. I say vulnerability is a huge situation, a huge asset in different cultural leadership, and because you have to understand that I'm probably wrong. I'm probably doing something that is not translating, and I'm not getting the results that any of us want because of that. So Doug, it really is really about research, and it's really about the leader wanting to communicate appropriately, impactfully, I should say, with each and every member of the team and each and every culture that he or she is working with.
How does that feedback loop work? The Because what occurs to me is, like in my case, I feel pretty good about Americans and how they think, and I feel quite good about Japanese, particularly when I see other people trying to lead or talk to Japanese and making bad mistakes.
Yes.
I'm aware of it at that level, like, oh my God, how could you be doing that or addressing the person that way and things like that? So I at least understand what's bad for certain things like that. But as a leader, so that gives me confidence in some level, at least in those two cultures. And others, like this morning, I was on a call with a group from Saudi Arabia and well, mainly Saudi Arabia, and I'm not as familiar with folks within that culture. How, especially when you're working with mixed groups, how do you get the you talked about wanting to be listening to all, but then how do you communicate that you're interested in that, and how do you get the feedback to be able to ask the questions to improve?
So the first thing to help you with that is preparation. So like I talked about research, preparation is the first thing. Now, after you've had that conversation and you think you want to go to somebody in Saudi Arabia and talk about it's then going either following up with that person or that team and asking them how the call went, what they got out of it, what how you could do better. That's why I said vulnerability is such a big deal in that situation, because you have to assume that you might have said something that wasn't as impactful as you intended to be to that audience. And so just asking, Doug, it's really as easy as just asking them what do they feel, what do they get, how what are they going to do moving forward from the conversation you just had with them, things like that. It's really about feelings, right? Remember, so what's that spectacular line by people don't hear what you say, but they understand how you make them feel, right? And you want to make sure you make them feel great. You make them feel the way you intended to make them feel, right? And the only way you can get from that is obviously do the research, but then ask the question of the individual person or team, and that's the only way you can do it. You can't do it any other way. and how, ask him, how could I be better? What should I do to be better for you? And maybe it's a pre-call, and then so you explain it to them. Maybe it's a note, an email. So we have people, if you just had a team in the US, right? You would have people on that who are very vocal. You would have people who are in the middle, and you would have people who, don't communicate at all. They might be listening very, very well, but they might not communicate. They might not want praise at all. You might say, "Hey, Michael, hey, great job. You're the best we have." And Michael could be a person that says, Doug, I don't really like being called out on a call like that in front of my peers. I really, just let me know by myself when we're a one-on-one. And that's just within, one country that you'll have that. So now you know that Michael doesn't like to be called out one-on-one, and you don't do that anymore. So you would email him, call him, text him, whatever the communication is, and tell him the same thing, because that's what he wants. Other people want to be highlighted, and you do it for them. And so there's really no difference. It's really knowing your team, understanding how they communicate, understanding what drives them. And from a cultural perspective, it's just understanding how you communicate with them the right way for them to be successful as possible.
Is that as like questions like how was the meeting, and then progressively deeper,
Yes.
to the point where, and by the way, how did I do with you? Or, I mean, what is the question where do you get to the question where you get that feedback?
Yeah, you do. How do I do with it? Did what I say make sense? Or did what I say, the question, I'm trying to think of it in all situations instead of just being a sales or type situation, but it's really about, what did you hear? What did you hear from me? What are you going to do different, or what are you going to do after I spoke? Right? There's lots of things you can ask, but Doug, you're correct. Asking from the big funnel question, how was the call? How was the meeting? And then start to go, what did everything that I say on the call resonate with you? Was there something I could have said better to you? And that's when, and by the way, in certain cultures, you're going to have to ask that 5, 6, 7, 8 times in a row before you get a truthful answer. Because they need to get to know you, respect you, understand that you really are sincere in asking that, and you really want their opinion.
Michael Quigley in the audience is a leader and a teacher of leadership across cultures. And I'm thinking, Michael, about the work that you've done with Russell Bedford and others, where you get in a room and you're with a variety of different cultural, people from different cultures. How do you handle that, and what are your suggestions relative to how you would recommend leaders address that challenge?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. If you want to listen or read to a book, there's one called No Rules Rules. It's a story of Netflix. When Rutherford was talking, it's exactly that. They had this American company, it's going great. Then they start to try and do work with Asia and Brazil, and they're like, it's not working. Why? And the guy is incredibly honest and said, we misunderstood the importance of relationships in business. We were too transactional, and he's very honest about that. So if you want to hear how somebody's played that out and made all their mistakes and learned from it, he's remarkably honest. I'd like to affirm what Rutherford said before about saying you might be wrong. I'm really influenced at the moment by Master Shi Heng Yi, who is the leader for the Shaolin Temple Europe in Germany. And what I like about him is he's got a fantastic blending of East and West, in that he was born, just when he was young, he moved to Germany. Anyway, he belongs to a 1,500-year-old tradition in Shaolin martial arts, but he's also, a German citizen. So he understands this very well. And the 2 of the 10 virtues they live by, the number 1 is humility. Starts with that idea of, I don't know it all. And I think for a lot of people, regardless where they are in the world, they really respect that. Different people might see it as weak or strong, depending on the context, right? But if you are saying, I am humble and willing to learn, as should you be, it's a really good starting point. And the second one is respect. And then going back to Russell Bedford, I remember the first time I was speaking at one of their conferences in Malta 6 years ago, and there was people from all around the world. And basically people tell you what they think of you. They come to you afterwards. I remember there was one guy from Belgium, he came and talked to me, and he was very kind of analytical. Then a guy from India came, and we talked about, I just turned vegan, so he told me about how they respect the earth, and he was vegetarian. So what I would say is never take anything personally. This is the hard bit Rutherford's talking about in leadership, the paradoxical aspect of leadership. It's all about you, and it's never about you. So you have to be able to be willing to say, like Rutherford very clearly articulated, here's the message, but here's how it landed. I can change that. We're not changing the message. We're not changing the virtue. We're not changing the thing, but how we articulate that, the wording we use. Do we use pictures? Do we use technology? Do we do it in private? Do we do it in public? Do we make it interactive? Whatever. That must and should change according to the culture. Be that a culture of a different type of person, be that internationally, nationally. What works really well in terms of that feedback, after the meeting, open-ended questions: who, why, what, when, if, where, which. Like you said, if you go too specific too soon, that could shock people. What I say in terms of intercultural, what we call intelligence, and this is where the Global Chamber has helped me so much, is go to what I call a primary source. Go to a native speaker. Go to somebody who lives in that country. Even better, go to somebody who's lived in that country and in other countries. So like Lulu, who's my Chinese friend who lives in the UK, I go to him about China. I don't go to a secondary source, be that the media, or a tertiary source, be that AI that is just a combination of the media. I go to the guy who knows his stuff, and he comes to me. So I think with that self-awareness, very important. Change the message and don't take it personally. Be humble and go to the people and just ask them. Most people are very honored by that, because they see you, especially internationally, as you're the leader and you know this. Yes, I do, but I don't know this in this context. And as I've learned Spanish, that's been incredibly humbling for me, because to be honest, as a native English speaker, as an English person, a lot of English people are very lazy in terms of learning other languages, because learning the language leads you to understand pragmatics, which means how does this land in a different language? I could carry on, but I'll stop there. And as a side note, the learning another language is the number one thing that's helped me to improve my cultural understanding as an international leadership person. If I didn't have that, I'm just blind. No matter how informed I think I am, I don't know anything. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah. So can I just double down on what Michael talked about with talking to people in that area? That's exactly the right thing to do. That's exactly the right thing to do is if you're concerned, or if you're trying to learn, talk to somebody in that region. Don't, you can look at, I want you to do research. That's the best research. That's and especially you get somebody in your company, somebody you know, somebody you trust, somebody that somebody else knows, that hey, if you want to know everything about Saudi Arabia, call Mike, right? So that's what you should do in all those situations when you're unsure. That's a great way to start, Doug.
Great advice. Thank you both. To be a good global leader, these are so important, whether you're leading a regional team or whether you're leading a team that has people from different cultures in it, or it's a global team where you've got people from all over the world. And all of these are great techniques to be able to get to the next level. I presume, Rutherford, then these are all kind of the day-to-day things that are very helpful, especially when things are relatively calm and not in crisis mode. So is this really kind of setting leaders up to be prepared for when a crisis hits, for when something really important is required, like the next level of performance, even if it's not a crisis, like we need now to get here because we've been able to accomplish this, we can now envision a future that gets us here. How does a leader leverage these kind of calmer times to be able to either to overcome a crisis or to create a next level of performance to be able to get to that next big hill that's hard to imagine?
Okay, so if the times are calm, this is a time to start building relationships as much as possible and learning as much as possible, because that's when you'll need it. You'll need those relationships. You'll need that understanding when times get tough. So this is the time where you want to do as much as you can to learn as much, because I don't say a downtime, but it's a time to build relationships. In every culture, trust is important. In every culture, trust is important. In many cultures, you get to trust differently. Some cultures, they trust the position. Others, they need to trust the relationship, right? And in the majority of it, it just takes time to get there. So if Doug, things are going as planned, you're just trying to get and learn as much, grow as much, because there's no downside to learning as much about everybody on your team as possible. There's zero downside. What you as much as you learn in those times, you can even grow faster because you know more about what's happening in that local market. Because there's always going to be this strategy that's a global strategy. Always. But how that strategy is executed locally in that market could be very, very different. And I'll give you something that was with me when I was a first line leader, and we had a product that was the number 2 product in its category, and we were trying to beat the number 1 product in its category. So I was a first line leader in California, and there was a national strategy, and the only problem is the strategy that they had nationally in California, that number 1 competitor was number 6 or 7 competitor in California. So it wouldn't have made any sense for me to do the strategy that they had nationally, because I wouldn't have grown at all. So none of us in California did what was the global strategy in that way. The global strategy is to grow the product. How we got there in what they wanted us, we couldn't do it that way, because it wouldn't have made any sense, because we wouldn't have grown at all if we did that. Because this product had a 50% share nationally and a 3% share in California. Yeah, I mean, that's not going to do it. So it's the same thing you would do if you're in Saudi Arabia, Japan, Germany, different places. You would have a global strategy, and how you execute it in Germany, Japan, Saudi Arabia, England is going to be, it could be different. And that's what you would do in those situations.
We're at a time, so I think we're at the point where it's time to wrap up, and so there's still a number of different things we'd like to cover, but nonetheless, this is the beginning, this is intended to be the beginning of a conversation that we do every month to help leaders understand how to be more impactful, how to be better leaders, how to have more impact. So Rutherford, thank you for taking the time to answer these questions. Michael, thank you for being such a great sport and being able to without any prior warning to answer questions. You obviously, both of you know the topic inside and out, so no surprise there. Maybe if you don't mind, maybe having both of you wrap up on one question and then anything else that you'd like to add. The question being, how does one measure the impact of their leadership? How do you measure where you are? How do you know how well you're doing? And Michael, I'll go with you first and then let Rutherford do the final wrap up if you don't mind. How does a leader measure success, and what else would you like to add?
When I was a teacher, I used to have children come up to me in the street and go, "Mr. Quigley, Mr. Quigley." And you go up to them and talk to them and scare them because they're actually, they didn't want to talk to you. What they really wanted to do was to show that they actually liked you outside of school. And to me, that's leadership. Metrics are important, data is important, making money is important, but changing people's lives and knowing you've had an impact on somebody's life, when they tell you, that's when you're successful. I'll give you an example. You can't say you're a good listener. When somebody tells you you're a good listener, you got it. And to me, that's the way to approach success in leadership. You'll hit all your targets, but they won't make you happy. It will be like Rutherford said, when they tell you something impactful and insightful from you, that's actually where it's at. And the final thing I just say is, people ask about all the time was uncertainty. How do you lead uncertain times? Or how do you, And I said, that's when you need to be certain in your character, because that's attractive. When you're cool under pressure, and you're consistently, however your leadership is, regardless, people take a bullet for you. So hope that gives some kind of insight. Over to Rutherford.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, so the easiest way for me to explain that is if somebody tells you, hey, we'll follow you wherever you go. If you change companies, and part of leadership is a faith or hope that the leader is doing the right thing. So they will follow you even though they don't completely understand the whole picture, right? And they'll follow. There'll be this gap. Like, I don't understand exactly what we're doing, but it's Michael Quigley, so we trust him, so we're gonna go. That's when you know that the leaders you've done it right. That's when you're in the company, and when somebody tells you that they will follow you, and the other part about that's when you leave. Okay, the other part about this, I've always said this, is when your best people invite the best people they know to come work for the company, to come work for you. That's a very tangible way of understanding. Because if you have a best friend or somebody who's great, and you are going through a difficult time, the culture's not good, the leadership's not good, you're not going to ask people to come here. You're going to say, don't come here. It's toxic. It's all these different words. If it's the opposite, that's when you know that people, when there's an opening and the people that you work with come up with 5 to 6 different candidates, that's a good sign. That's a really good sign that you are doing things well, and people want to work. If every single time there's an opening, you never have anybody on your team ask a friend to come over, that's a different sign that you might want to adjust and change and find out why that happens. So those are the things that both when you're staying with a company and when you're leaving, that tells you you're doing a good job. Doug, sometimes people don't tell you, most of the times people do not tell you you're great. They don't, every once in a while, like 1 or 2 people will say something. I really like your leadership. I like what, but that's a rarity. Majority of the people say nothing, to your face. They might say something to friends. So you just have to look for these other little signs to tell you that, that you're a good leader, doing something right. The numbers tell you one thing. The culture, the people could tell you something completely different. So I care more about what the people tell me, how they tell me, than the numbers.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing. Thank you all for participating today. We've come to the end of the hour. This is intended to be a monthly event. I see that it's not on the, I don't think it's on the calendar for next time. So I'll work with Jim to be able to do that and coordinate with Rutherford and others to make sure that that is. Thank you, Rutherford, for all that you do, for your leadership with Global Chamber Phoenix and beyond, all the great work, including the folks that we've introduced you to and the positive feedback that they've given in terms of your ability to give them the information to be better, to recommend you. And so thank you for that. And thank you for everything. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael. You're amazing.
Take care.
You're both remarkable. Thank you. Thanks, Jim.